first of all, I think for the people who are really seeking, right, I would say to really just kind of put down agendas, right? Put down whether it's a personal agenda, an organizational agenda, and really just kind of open your heart, open your mind, and listen, right? I would say to consider the evidence, right? Weigh the evidence, which we should be doing anyway. And then for those of us who are in the faith, take the opportunity to, enrich your faith, right? For me, again, as somebody who grew up in the church, rooted in scripture, I felt like this helped me to root my faith in history, right? And in knowing the people and the heritage that came before me, right? Hearing about some of the African scholars, hearing about, the African martyrs, right? People who were crucified, and persecuted for the faith, for reading the same scriptures as me. Like, this really helped to root my history, and it really helped to connect a lot of the dots.
What's up, everyone? Lisa Fields here, and I'm so excited about our new curriculum, Courageous Conversations. You heard about our popular conference, Courageous Conversations, where we invite the leading pastors, thought leaders, and scholars from conservative and progressive backgrounds for conversations. But we not only want to have those conversations on stage at the conference, but we want you to have them in your everyday life. So we developed a curriculum for you to do just that. Courageous Conversations curriculum, the tools you need for the conversations in culture. You can get that today on Amazon or on our website at jude3project.org. Well, thank you for watching another episode of the Jude 3 Project podcast. As always, I'm Lisa, the founder of the Jude 3 Project, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Christopher Lamarck. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. This is nice. It's the G3 spot. I can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me on here. Let our audience know just a little bit about yourself before we get into your role in the film.
Yeah, sure. I am a writer, director, and cinematographer. I run a production company out here in Houston called Cross Culture Studios. I actually graduated from the University of Houston with a degree in media production. Funny, it's like in art, it's like if you have a degree, everybody's like, okay, yeah, you got a degree, great. But I got it, and my parents are very glad that I got that degree. So, shortly after, I moved out to Los Angeles, started acting, got on some television shows, had some fun with that, and then transitioned to behind the camera where I started writing and kind of curating my own work. As a director, I've had an opportunity to work with some unique actors, music videos, short films, feature films, documentaries. And yeah, I just want to do that, keep creating work and visual, expressions that can, be an extension of my faith, encourage people, challenge people. And yeah, really just, hopefully last a lifetime. So
dope. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you over these last few years.
Yeah.
We keep getting a lot of feedback, a good positive feedback from the film Unspoken, which really Chris was the catalyst for several years ago. So I met Chris really from a cold email. So let nobody tell you that cold emails don't work.
That's right. They do work. I had my concerns. I was
Chris,
like, she ain't gonna read this thing, but you responded quick.
So Chris reached out to me several years ago because he had the idea for a documentary, because he had been following Jude 3 and the different scholars that we've had on there. And I responded to him quickly, but it was quickly like, no, we can't do this. I mean, it would be great, but I don't have the money to do it. And then, y'all already saw the episode. If you haven't, go back to how Don came in the picture with the finances to do this film. But Chris was also willing to do the production for free, which was still something we couldn't do because as we've discovered through this process, it's a lot more expensive than we could have ever imagined.
True. Very, very true.
So Chris, tell them, our audience, what kind of inspired you to want to do a documentary like Unspoken?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like this has really been a long time coming. I had heard of the objection that Christianity was, a white man's religion, Western European religion before, but quite honestly, I dismissed it. I dismissed that notion because I thought it was, foolish. Until someone,
Mm-hmm.
really close to me in my life kind of brought this objection to me, and I feel like it kind of hit me where it's like, we can't really be the hands and feet of change unless if we keep dismissing other people's concerns, right? No
Mm-hmm.
matter how non-scholarly I think it is, no matter how ridiculous I think it is, if a person has a concern, then we really need to address that, right? And so this person brought that
Mm-hmm.
concern to me, started asking me questions. I felt like I was able to answer some of the questions, but as we began to go deeper and deeper, I didn't really have what I would say good answers. You know what I mean? And so started
Mm-hmm.
doing research. A lot of that research led me to Jude 3 and all the work that you were doing, and still are doing. And as I was trying to find answers for this one particular individual, I felt like I was getting answers for myself, right? And this is somebody who grew up in the
Mm-hmm.
church. And so it just made
Mm-hmm.
sense that, if this was helping me in this way, in this capacity, it was going to help somebody else. And so I immediately thought this has to be a documentary. Like somebody ought to turn this into a documentary. And usually when you say
Mm-hmm.
somebody ought to do fill in the blank, that somebody's probably you, right? So I knew I
Mm-hmm.
had the skills and to do it, and reached out to you. You reached out to Don, and here we are today.
Yeah. So, Unspoken, what what was your favorite part about making the film?
Ooh, my favorite part about making the film. There were a lot. I would say my favorite experience about making the film was really just traveling and getting
Mm-hmm.
to have a front row seat to all of these, amazing minds. You know what I mean? To be able
Mm-hmm.
to, hear Dr. Bantu, Dr. Mason, Catherine Gerbner, David Daniels, Will Hite, the list goes on and on. To be able to go to places like the Armstrong Browning Library, and just all the
Mm-hmm.
traveling and learning that we did, I would say that like that not only was my favorite experience, but like had an indelible impact on my life, and on my faith.
That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Now, one thing we've gotten several compliments off of, I mean, that's a consistent, is that the film is so well done from a cinematography
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. Obviously, the information is good, but information put in a nice package is even better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, it would not be the quality it was if it had not been for you. That is 100% on you. The quality, the angles, and all of that. Kind of uh, tell our audience a little bit about the importance of that, because I think sometimes we think about like information. It's just like food.
Yeah,
If you have a good meal, it's good food, but the presentation is off, it's gonna kind of throw it
that's
off.
right.
So it's enough that it's great to have scholars, but the excellence of the presentation adds to, I think, the total package of the film. Just talk a little bit about that, because I mean, Latasha Morrison was talking about like how excellently this is done, like from the angles, like the all the
Yeah.
cinematography, and that's a constant thing that I hear from a lot of people. Just talk a little bit about why that's so important as from your expertise as a cinematographer
Yeah, yeah. First of
director.
all, thank you so much, and thank God. I'm glad that it came out. I felt like you and Don kind of you left a lot of space and a lot of creative freedom for me to kind of do the things that I wanted to do. I feel like I remember on one of the shoots, some of the people in it when I was setting up a shot, and a profile shot, and some people were kind of looking at the camera like, is the camera gonna be over there? Like, am I supposed? It just wasn't very traditional, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I was looking to really try to create. When I think about Unspoken and what the scholars were talking about, it was unique and bold,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like we had to create a look that was also unique and bold and kind of spoke that same language. And so that's why you
Mm-hmm.
see kind of some of those angles. The biggest thing was I was trying to make, instead of this just being a documentary, right? I wanted to make
Mm-hmm.
it an experience, right? To really set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, cinematography and bringing that, to to whatever project that you're working on. For me as an artist, I try to find myself in the work and see what I can do to contribute to the work. And so yeah, just trying to find like I said, unique angles that could speak the same language, and be memorable, that people not only subconsciously may be thinking about some of those shots, they walk away and they think, man, I heard such impactful content, but I also
The faces that were not in here when we first got started. I'm glad that you guys stuck around to watch the documentary with us. And so just again, if you had any questions that you wanted to submit, you can text that number 501-299-9009. And I believe that we are now streaming to those who are online. So if you are online, I hope that you have taken the time yourself to watch the documentary Unspoken. And if you have any questions for our guest as we get started with the Q&A portion, go ahead and text those questions to 501-299-9009. Okay, and we're going to get started. But first, I want to introduce our special guest, who is the founder and creator of Jude 3 Project. We have Lisa Fields with us in the house. So give it up for her. Give it up for Miss Lisa Fields, who's traveled all the way to little old Arkansas to be with us this evening. And y'all, Lisa Fields is one of the world's most sought after Christian apologists. And I know that we've talked about this word apologetics before, but she is a Christian apologist. She sets out to defend the Christian faith, and she combines her passion for biblical literacy with her heart for sharing God's love with everyone she meets. Lisa's desire to deeply understand the Bible and her faith has led her to obtaining a Master of Divinity. And then she started the Jude 3 Project to help Black Christian communities know what they believe and why they believe it. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And since starting the Jude 3 Project, Lisa has received several honors and recognitions for her work as a Christian apologist in the African American community. And so she continues to break new ground in this work for the sake of the gospel. And she's also added the title of producer to her resume for films such as what we just watched, Unspoken. And so tonight we're going to talk about her work and why it is so important, significant to the Black community. So again, give it up for Miss Lisa Fields. All right. Hey, girl.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. So, Lisa, the film was amazing. I must say, this is my third time watching it. And I was just as enthused about it as the first time that I watched it. And so beyond the obvious reasons for the film that was discussed in the film about Christianity being this white man's religion, I want to know what sparked you to take this journey to doing work like this, to being a Christian apologist. Can you tell us a little bit of background about your work that led to Unspoken?
Yeah, so I never intended to be here. My journey was supposed to take me to Wall Street as a stockbroker, but we see I'm not in New York working on Wall Street now. I had electives available to me in my undergrad time as an investment finance major, and I decided to take New Testament thinking that it would be an easy A like Sunday school, but nobody told me that New Testament at a university was different than Sunday school. And so I was shocked when the first day of class my professor said, I'm going to change everything you thought you knew about Jesus. And that's when I knew that this wasn't Sunday school. And so I really struggled through that time. I call it a crisis of faith. My professor was challenging me with textual criticism and different things and had me thinking about, like, should I trust this Bible? And that led me on a journey in apologetics. My dad saw me struggling. I'm a PK, so he's a pastor. He gave me some resources in apologetics to help me navigate the class. And that was really helpful for me. But as I got more and more immersed in apologetics, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. in the space. And so I thought that there needed to be somebody to bridge the gap for African Americans in apologetics. And that's what sparked my journey to start Jude 3. And so ended up switching my major from investment finance to religious studies and communications. And then later would go to seminary and started the Jude 3 project the last year of seminary.
Wow. All the way from money to Christianity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big jump, right?
Yeah.
So there was something interesting that you said, and I want to know, why do you believe this is? You said that you didn't see many like you in the field of apologetics. Why do you believe that is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of apologetics, classical apologetics, focuses on the existence of God. And in the African American community, atheism is not something that's prominent. It is on the rise, but it's not something historically in our community that's a pervasive concern. We believe that God exists generally. How he interacts with us, there's diversity of thought around that, but there's generally a belief that God exists. And since a large part of apologetics focuses on proving the existence of God, a lot of it just didn't resonate with the community that already had a strong belief.
Ooh, it didn't resonate with the community. Now, we saw a lot coming from this documentary regarding how the Black community is impacted by other religions and how they are heavily influenced, right? Because what's passed down, the rhetoric that's passed down that doesn't align with what we've now seen in Unspoken, that shows that Christianity is for us. We are in the Bible. But I want to know, and I'm going to go to this question because Dr. Eric Mason, he said something profound along the lines of whites in the Bible have to be found, not people of color. And so it amazes me that we as people of color struggle with finding ourselves in the space of defending the faith when we're right there in the faith, like we are the foundation for the faith, right? As far as in the Bible, of course, we know Christ is the solid rock we stand on, right? I want to be clear. But I agree with what Eric Mason said. And so what I want to ask you is, how do we keep people from upholding or promoting the idea of Black supremacy through discussions like this, right? And keep Christ as the solid rock that we stand on when it comes to apologetics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what is thought of when people start to say the Black presence in the Bible and highlighting Black presence in the Bible, then white brothers and sisters start to say, well, isn't this the same thing as white supremacy? But when Black people are looking for themselves in the Bible, they're looking to affirm their identity. They're not looking to lord over people. And so I think when we think of white supremacy, that is to lord over people, to make people feel less than. When Black people are looking for themselves, we're affirming that we are made in the image of God and that God has created us with gifts, talents, and abilities and has used us throughout biblical and human history to do great things for him. And so I think I never fear it becoming Black supremacy, because the most of the people that I know that are looking for the Black presence in the Bible are looking for their dignity to be affirmed. They're not trying to have some power over others. And so I think that's important for us to note. But I think people that have a supremacist mindset and bent towards supremacy might project that onto other people, which reveals more about them than the people they are talking to.
Whew, that's good. That's good. So it brings me to the question, though. We have the history, okay? We have the information. We have the Bible in itself. Why are we still even having to have conversations about Christianity being the white man's religion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one is iconography.
Can you break that down?
Yes, the images that we see of Jesus and people, Bible characters, deeply impact how people view Christianity. So case in point, there was a student I used to work with some at-risk youth at a high school in Jacksonville, Florida, called Lee High School, and there was a program called EVAC. And so working with these young people was really just a delight to do do. And one of the guys, he got a tennis scholarship to Florida A&M University. And he was wrestling with his faith and asked his teacher, hey, can I talk to Lisa? I have some questions. And he began to think Christianity is a white man's religion. And so I talked to him. I was like, why do you think that? He was like, because of the imagery I see of the Bible characters. He even said to me, if the Bible characters, if Adam and Eve were white, is my skin color a product of the fall?
Wow.
And that shows you how powerful the imagery is, that he thought he was only black because of sin. And he thought that all the Bible characters were white. And it shows you how powerful iconography can be to the human psyche and how it impacts black and brown people to constantly see the images and people in the Bible and Jesus portrayed as white. And so I think iconography is one. I think also the social times we live in, the social and political times, when you see people using a slave Bible-esque understanding of Christianity to oppress people still and to not care about the people on the margins, that kind of perpetuates this narrative that Christianity is a white man's religion. So I think those are some things that keep that narrative alive.
Wow, I agree. I mean, it is sometimes as deep as people thinking that their skin color is a result of the fall, especially when oppression makes us feel like it's a punishment to be people of color. So it leads me to one of the reasons why I personally think that we still are at this intersection of Christianity and culture when it comes to white man's religion is we're not talking about it enough in the churches. And so not only do we have the imagery reflecting something that is not, and then the world around us, right? But even in the church setting, a lot of times we're not talking about it, right? We're not addressing how social justice fits with our spirituality. And so I want to ask you, Lisa, how do we start implementing this into the church so that everyone is fully aware that Christianity is not the white man's religion? I don't think that it should start when we're full-grown adults and trying to figure it out in the world. How do we implement that into all churches?
Yeah, I think one thing is to decenter ourselves in how we implement things in church. And what I mean by that, sometimes if it wasn't your struggle, you don't pay as much attention to it. And so you don't think it has credence because that was something you never struggled with. And so if you never struggle with this idea of Christianity being the white man's religion, you might think that's not really a valid reason. You go to an all-black church, you know it's not a white man's religion. Look at all the black people in here. You know, that's a response that I've continuously heard from even black churches. And so I think to decenter yourself, to know that just because it's not your objection doesn't mean that it's not a valid objection for other people. Christianity being a white man's religion was never an objection that I had personally. But I understood that it was an objection that many people were struggling with. So I made their objection a priority. And I think that we need to consider what people are wrestling with in the pews and respond accordingly. And so I think that's one thing. Education, documentaries like Unspoken, but education is preventative. It helps you impact people before they go out into the world and hear the objections that are going to cause them to walk away. So I tell people in your youth ministries, in your teen ministries, start telling them the history of Christianity. We have this thing where if we entertain them, they will stay. But I think if you educate them, they will stay. And so young people, I feel, are more able than sometimes older people to handle complex issues because they're dealing with it every day in school. So they're dealing with geometry, they're dealing with history, they're dealing with all of these robust topics. So their brain is already thinking critically because they're in school. Older people sometimes aren't thinking critically because they've been out of school so long and they're in a job that has regularity to it. And they're not necessarily all the time being stretched. But younger people already have a mind to engage these robust ideas. And so when they get to church, we shouldn't be entertaining them so much that then we send them off to college and wonder why they walk away, because we haven't equipped them with the tools to stay.
Ooh, and that's discipleship, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds like discipleship. So we should be equipping our children, but I think discipleship starts at home. And so we have to learn our history so that we can teach our children, right? And then when they come to church, they may ask questions if the leader is not talking about that, and it sparks more conversation. And speaking of education, since we're here, you have a book that you wrote, Through the Eyes of Color, correct? I want you to tell us a little bit about how you journeyed through writing and producing that book, and how that can be implemented for children or for young adults or for adults, grown people. Do you have children's versions to implement into churches? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Through Eyes of Color was a collaborative effort between me and our curriculum writer, Yana Carner, who does a phenomenal job with us. So I want to give her a shout out because she spent a lot of time curating this with me. But Through Eyes of Color really was us hearing from pastors that they were using our podcast in their churches. And so we wanted to help them by having a curriculum, something that they wouldn't have to piecemeal the stuff together. We provided it for them. And all our curriculums Through Eyes of Color, Unspoken, are written on the 6th, 7th grade level. So they're written for the average congregant, but they're also written for teens. Anybody could go through it. We have people telling me they're going through it with their kids because we wrote it so it would be tangible and accessible for everybody in the pews. We knew that a lot of times, a lot of stuff we do, whether it's our conferences or our podcasts, we're talking to scholars a lot. And so sometimes it's hard for the average person to grasp everything. So we make the resources that we produce accessible to everyone. And so that was really us. Through Eyes of Color was us taking the major objections of the Christian faith from a Black perspective and answering those objections in a digestible way for the everyday churchgoer.
Ooh, that's so good. Where can they find Through the Eyes of Color? Just in case somebody is tuning in right now to the question and answer portion, or someone sitting out here right now, where can they find Through the Eyes of Color?
Yeah, they can find it on Amazon. And we also, on Right Now Media, there's a video portion of me doing
Y'all
a
heard
video
that,
series.
Right Now Media. Listen, we have Right Now Media, so I'll make sure to add it to our St. Mark channel. But we want to make sure that you access it through Right Now Media, okay? That's what we have it for. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that. So we have some submitted questions, and one of the questions is, it's really good. They asked, how do you overcome people who depend on bad sources? So we've talked about good sources. How do you overcome people who depend on bad sources like YouTube or, word of mouth, to help them understand the truth about Christianity and its Black roots? Because they tend to dig in on false information. How do we prevent that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things we ask people when we encounter this objection is, where did you get that from? And if they point you to a meme or a website, then I think a great question to ask is, how do you know that is a valid source? Just that question. And then you could get to how they source information in general. So one of the things is, there's this thing, especially in our community, where people feel like hidden knowledge is always right because people are trying to hide things from us. And so you have to overcome that objection, because then you'll say, well, hey, you can show them even the documentary and say, hey, Dr. Vince Montu is a PhD, and they'll say, well, I don't trust white man's education. And so you end up going in these circles in conversation. But I think one of the ways that we overcome that objection is ask the person, move from that argument and ask the person, when did you start thinking that Christianity was a white man's religion? Because it just didn't start with a meme. A meme validated what you were already feeling. And so ask that question to get to the deeper root of the issue, instead of arguing about sources of information, because that could just go in circles.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. As you were speaking, it made me think of Lecrae, who's one person who he's a Christian artist. Most people know Lecrae. He was in the documentary, and his latest album, he talks about reconstructing his faith, right? Not deconstructing and totally getting rid of it, but reconstructing the way he saw himself as a Christian. And in one of his songs, he says, "I got Vince Bantu on my shelf. I read different," right? And Vince Bantu is another person who is featured in the documentary, and it reminds me of how, although we can get engaged in these conversations about what people feel against Christianity, we have to read for ourselves and study to show ourselves approved, right? And we have to read books that are for us, by us. So I attended Liberty University, just as you did, for my Master of Divinity as well. And one of the things that I noticed was that the books that they were giving us in apologetics and theology, homiletics, were white authors. And so I had to seek for myself black authors, which is how I came across James Cone, to study to show myself approved. Like, I wanted to know, how do I fit in this narrative of Christianity? And so projects like Jude 3 Project, Unspoken, Vince Bantu are ways to help us grow. So with that, I want to ask you, Lisa, what do you say as believers ourselves, right? What do you say to people around us in our community who may have professed at one point to be a Christian believer, but because of the rhetoric, because of the YouTube and social media and television, they have now started dabbling in divination and horoscopes and crystals and all of these things that may be spiritual but aren't necessarily holy. How do you engage them in conversation and defend the faith that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things we have to ask people is, what are you looking for? Because people add to Christianity because they think Christianity doesn't work the way they thought it should work. And so, case in point, I was talking to a gentleman that is from Nigeria. He came over here just to speak, and he was going back home. And I was saying, well, what is the Christian, climate like in Nigeria? And he was like, well, there's a lot of people that converted to Christianity that also supplement Christianity with African spiritualism because they feel like Christianity is insufficient to what they're going through. Terrorists were still blowing them up, still navigating that, and they felt like they needed some protection from African spiritualism because Christianity wasn't living up to the protection they thought it should offer. And so that's Nigeria, but I think that still happens here, that people became Christians and they felt like Christianity failed them in a sense, that it didn't provide the joy, the peace, the purpose, the things that it should have. And they feel like they need to supplement Christianity with other things. And so I always want to know, what are you looking for? What do you feel like Christianity failed to do for you? And I think that's a question to help us understand the root of the issue and not start arguing with them about sage and crystals. Because that could be an argument, but I think the deeper question underneath the surface is, what are you looking for in faith? What do you think that Christianity didn't deliver on that you hoped it would? And that's the conversation that I think gets to a more robust conversation of engagement. And then you could, in those conversations, you can help reframe what Christianity was supposed to do versus what they expected, had a false expectation of it to do.
Oh, that is so good. Thank you for that. So I really hope that helped someone who may be listening or tuning in online, and they may be struggling with that because in this world today, recently we've had the Beyonce conversation and, all of these topics of, why is it not holy and all of these things. So with that, I'm going to ask you one last question as we get ready to close out the night. And again, thank you so much for being here. Someone submitted a question, and it goes back to our topic of how do we implement the right type of discussions, right? And they said, states are starting to outlaw teaching about Black presence in history. How can youth leaders and parents affirm Black dignity in their homes or with their children with the government trying to strip that away? So we're talking about implementing it in the homes and implementing it while they're young, but how do we do that when the school is trying to teach them something else or take away what they need to learn?
Yeah, I think this presents a great opportunity for the church to be a educating force for our young people. We give up so much of the education we should be giving our people and expect the secular institutions to do it for us. But I think this is an opportunity for us to host events. We don't do Sunday school anymore. A lot of churches don't do Sunday school, but have teen gatherings where we teach teens history. And sometimes we need to have gatherings where we teach parents the history so they can teach the teens. And so I think this is an opportunity. When the world gets dark, it's a time for our lights to shine and us to educate and empower and equip, and don't leave it to the hands of schools to do it, but the church does it. In Florida, there was a story of a church that actually took on the responsibility of educating the community in our history because they knew that the Governor DeSantis was closing avenues for it to be taught in the church, in the schools. So they said, we're going to teach that program in the church. And so I think it's an opportunity for churches to do things like that, to educate parents and educate students, and still advocate also advocate in society for this to be taught in schools. So it's a both and. We teach and we advocate.
Teach and advocate. That's really good. And that is what events like this tonight is all about, teaching and advocating and helping you to grow. We have a promise, and that is what? You grow here. And we truly do believe in growing here at St. Mark. And one of the ways we believe in growing is through learning. And so it is events like this, through opportunities like this, that we can grow as followers of Christ. But you have to participate. You have to participate. And so when we have events like this, it is your due diligence to be a part of it so that you can learn. And if you already know, to be able to gather more information to help someone else learn. And that is how we evangelize and how we disciple in the Christian community, so that we all grow together. Our theme this year is Lift Higher, and that is we're trying to glorify God in every area of our lives. And what that means is we need to take every opportunity that we can to make sure that God is glorified in the church and in the community, right? In the building here, but also in the community, because the church is essentially the community. And so as a body of Christ, we're encouraging you to continue growing with us. Thank you guys for participating in this event tonight, for watching the documentary with us. Thank you for getting through the rain and not letting it stop you from coming out. We appreciate you. If you didn't, make sure that you submit the form to let us know that you are here on tonight. The QR code is on the big screens behind me. Make sure you submit so you have an opportunity to win that $100, right, Pastor John? Yes, we're giving $100 to those who participated in tonight's watch party. Again, we want to thank you, Lisa Fields, for traveling here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, this has been amazing.